the door of the boardroom was kicked open. The metal handle slammed into the wall with a dull bang. When Vivian Su's white high heels stepped inside, Zach Zhou was crouching on the floor, holding a shard of broken glass between his fingers. It came from the cup he had used to make tea that morning. When Eric Chen entered, he had accidentally knocked it off the table with his elbow, shattering it all over the floor. 10 minutes ago, Zach had bent down to pick it up himself. Because he knew that if the glass was not cleaned properly, the cleaning lady would be fined. "Stop picking it up." Vivian Su's voice fell from above his head, carrying a careless arrogance. Her high heel stepped on the largest piece of glass and crushed it. The shard cracked into smaller pieces under her sole. Behind her stood 3 bodyguards in black suits, all broad-shouldered and heavy-set. The last person to enter was her male secretary, Eric Chen. Eric's left hand was wrapped in snow-white bandages from his wrist to his forearm and hung against his chest. His face looked grim. But at the corner of his mouth, there was a faint smile he could barely hide. "You spilled coffee all over me yesterday." Vivian stood above Zach, placing her handbag on the edge of the conference table with a sharp tap. "When Secretary Chen tried to stop you, you twisted his hand until it fractured. Zach Zhou, do you have no shame?" Zach did not raise his head. He was still holding a piece of broken glass. Thin threads of blood seeped from between his fingers, slid along the lines of his palm, and dripped onto the marble floor. "President Su." His voice was flat. Flat like dead water. "That was a blind spot in the surveillance. He ran into me himself." "You're still arguing?" Vivian laughed. Today she wore a white Chanel couture suit. A gold brooch commemorating the company's 30th anniversary was pinned at her collar. Her long hair was neatly pinned up. She looked clean and radiant. That radiance made Zach, crouching on the ground, look even more gray and defeated. A faded plaid shirt. Washed-out jeans. A small tuft of hair sticking up at the back of his head. He looked like he had just finished moving boxes in a warehouse. Vivian turned and glanced at Eric. Eric immediately leaned close to her ear. His lips were almost touching her earlobe as he whispered something. While speaking, his peripheral gaze swept over Zach with the satisfaction of a hunter watching prey. Vivian listened and nodded. 3 slaps. She raised 3 pale fingers. Her nude-colored nail polish reflected the light. 1 slap from each man. "If you still dare talk back after that, we add another round." Zach finally lifted his head. Through the hair falling over his forehead, his eyes locked onto Vivian's delicately made-up eyes. He had looked at those eyes for 5 years. But he had never truly seen what was inside them. "Are you sure?" "I'm very sure." Vivian stepped back and handed her handbag to Eric with smooth precision, as if this scene had been rehearsed many times. "You are the live-in son-in-law of the Su family. You eat from my family, live in my family's house, and even the renovation of this office was paid for by me. So what if I have you slapped a few times?" The first bodyguard stepped forward. He had a buzz cut, and his neck was as thick as a tree stump. He flexed his wrist. When the slap came down, Zach's head snapped to the right, and his whole body staggered sideways. Burning pain exploded across his face. The inside of his mouth was cut by his teeth. Blood instantly filled his mouth. The corner of his lip split open. A line of blood ran down his chin and dripped onto his shirt collar, spreading into a dark red stain. He heard people in the hallway peeking through the door crack. Soft footsteps. Sharp inhales. Whispered voices saying, "Oh my God." Those sounds squeezed in through the crack like flies. 1. Vivian counted. Her tone was calm, like she was reading a menu. The second bodyguard stepped forward. He had tattoos on his right arm. His palm swung in a wide arc, bringing wind with it. Zach's ear buzzed. His vision went black. His temple throbbed painfully. He lost his balance and only avoided falling because one hand caught the edge of the conference table. On the table sat the tea he had brewed that morning. Tiguanyin. It was already cold. Tea leaves had sunk to the bottom. 2. The third bodyguard licked his lips and rolled his shoulders. He was the largest one, with shoulders nearly a meter wide. When his slap landed, Zach was knocked half a step backward. His back slammed into the wall. The gold-framed motto on the wall, "Integrity and Win-Win," tilted. One hanging cord snapped. The frame hung crookedly from the nail, swaying. 3. Vivian looked at Eric with satisfaction. "Feeling better?" Eric rubbed his bandaged wrist. His smile was impossible to hide now. Much better, President Sue. You really care about me. Zach leaned against the wall. Half of his face was swollen beyond recognition. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth, down his chin, and dripped onto his collar. He did not wipe it away. He simply lifted his eyes slowly and looked at Vivian. That look was too calm. Vivian Sue. Because of the swelling in half his face, his voice was unclear. But every word was bitten cleanly. Do you remember what your father once said? My father? Vivian turned and walked away. Her high heels tapped against the marble floor like a countdown. If my father knew you bullied Eric, he would kick you out of the Sue family. If you know what's good for you, hand in your resignation before the end of the day. I don't keep useless people. At the door, she stopped again and turned slightly. Morning light slanted through the window, outlining the side of her face with gold. Oh, right. The medical expenses for your mother this month, I'm not approving them. Figure it out yourself. The door closed. Click. Whispers in the hallway rushed in like a tide. President Sue is too ruthless. 3 slaps in front of everyone, who told him, alive and husband, to offend Secretary Chen. Eric is President Sue's high school classmate. Their relationship is solid. I heard Eric and President Sue were together back in high school. Later, her family forced her to marry. Zach is finished this time. He's a useless kept man, and he still dared act tough. Now his job is gone, his wife is gone, and even his mother's medical expenses are cut. Look at him. He got slapped and didn't even dare fart. Zach slowly straightened. Half his face burned. His vision still doubled slightly. But he stood steady. He took an old phone from his pocket. The screen had a crack across it. The casing corners were worn white. His thumb scrolled to the very bottom of the contact list. A number with no name saved. Only digits. He looked at the screen for 2 seconds. Then sent 2 words. Do it. After sending it, he put the phone back into his pocket. Then he crouched down again, picked up each shard of broken glass, and threw them into the trash. His blood stained the glass. He wiped the table clean with tissues and straightened the crooked frame on the wall. After finishing, he patted his hands together. As if he had only completed the most ordinary task. The cleaning lady poked half her head in. White hair stuck out from under her cap. Her wrinkled face was full of concern. Mr. Zhou, should I call you a car? No need. Zach nodded at her. The movement tugged at his wound, but he did not frown. Auntie, don't worry about the floor. I already wiped it. The cleaning lady looked at his swollen face. Her lips moved. In the end, she only squeezed out a soft sigh. Zach walked out of the office. When he passed through the hallway, everyone immediately shut their mouths. Some lowered their heads and pretended to read documents. Some turned and walked the other way. Some avoided his gaze. But his steps were neither fast nor slow. His back was straight. Half his face was swollen. Blood sat at the corner of his mouth. But his eyes were calm, as if he had just woken from sleep. The elevator descended. The numbers changed one by one. He looked at his reflection in the stainless steel door. His left cheek was badly swollen. The wound at the corner of his mouth had formed a thin scab. He rubbed the edge of the scab with his thumb. Pain shot through his temple. 3 slaps. He said to himself softly, like he was reciting something only he needed to hear. Just enough for you to remember this day. The elevator reached the first floor. The doors opened. Employees in the lobby froze when they saw him. Some pretended not to notice. He walked through the revolving door. The noon sun struck his face brightly. He narrowed his eyes and raised his hand to stop a taxi. After getting into the back seat, he gave an address. The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. He wanted to say something, but finally just started the meter in silence. Zach leaned back and closed his eyes. His phone vibrated once in his pocket. He did not check it. Outside the car window, the 38-story Sue Group building retreated farther and farther. But the gold Sue character on the rooftop still reflected light. It stabbed the eyes. Zach opened his eyes. Driver. Please go faster. At 11 that night, Vivian finally returned home. She had spent the day scolding the logistics department, holding 3 meetings, and arguing with suppliers for 2 hours. Eric stayed beside her the entire time. He served tea, poured water, and struggled to type meeting notes with his fractured hand. Several times, when she saw his awkward typing, she remembered Zach's expressionless face and felt angry again. All the lights in the villa living room were on. This house had been bought by old Mr. Su years ago. A 3-story detached villa with a garden and swimming pool. Market value, at least 80 million yuan. Vivian had chosen the renovation style herself. New Chinese luxury. Even the Italian imported sofa in the living room cost 700,000. Zach sat on that sofa. The wounds on his face had been simply treated. The swelling had not fully gone down. 2 pieces of medical gauze were stuck to his left cheek, and there were traces of iodine at the corner of his mouth. On the coffee table lay a signed document. A 4-paper. 3 pages. Neatly arranged. Vivian changed into slippers and glanced at it. She walked over barefoot, leaving her high heels by the door. Her bag was casually hung on the back of a dining chair. Her body looked relaxed, but her eyes remained sharp. Resignation letter? Divorce agreement, Zach said. Vivian froze for a moment. Then she laughed. A laugh of disbelief, amused contempt. She walked to the wine cabinet and poured herself a glass of red wine. Dark red liquid swirled in the crystal glass. Only after taking a sip did she turn back. Have you gone insane, Zach? Divorce? What are you divorcing me with? Your mother's special care hospital room costs 80,000 a month. Your sister is a junior in college and hasn't paid this semester's tuition yet. Without me, you won't even have a place to sleep. She flicked her hair and walked toward him on bare feet. Even your cab fare comes from the wages I pay you. Sign it. Zach pushed a pen toward her. A cheap pen. 1.5 yuan. There were bite marks on the cap from his habit of chewing it when thinking. Vivian did not take the pen. She bent over the coffee table and skimmed the agreement. There was still wine in her mouth. Only after swallowing did she speak. Do you feel especially wronged after being slapped 3 times today? Let me tell you, if not for the fact that you stayed with my family for 5 years, it would not have ended with a few slaps. Eric's wrist has a minor fracture. The doctor said he needs 3 months to recover. Do you know how much it delays work when he can't type? The entire project department is stuck because of him. Zach said nothing. His eyes lowered, focused on the agreement on the coffee table. He had printed those 3 pages from the company printer that afternoon. While the paper was still warm, he had written the terms by hand, 1 word at a time. Vivian took another sip of wine, picked up the divorce agreement, and scanned 2 lines. Split the property equally. Zach Zhou, what property do you even have? This villa belongs to my father. The car you drive is under my name. The little money in your bank account is salary I paid you. What exactly are you splitting? She slapped the agreement back onto the coffee table. Don't be ridiculous. You leaving with nothing is already generous enough. She picked up the pen and wrote a few words next to the signature line. What do you have to split? Her handwriting was messy. At the end, she added a question mark and pressed a heavy dot under it. I'm not signing. But I accept your resignation. Starting tomorrow, you don't need to come to the company. She tossed the pen. The metal barrel bounced twice on the coffee table and fell onto the carpet. Stay here if you like. It's not like you have many days left anyway. Next month, I'm renovating this house. You'll move out. Zach stood. He was more than half a head taller than Vivian. When he stood, she had to lift her chin to look at him. But there was no fear on her face. She was used to looking down on this man. Vivian Su, you didn't even read the agreement properly. I did. You leave with nothing. Whether you write it or not, it's the same. Holding her wine glass, she walked toward the stairs. Her bare feet stepped onto the steps. The hem of her red dress swayed. Stop showing that swollen face in front of me. It annoys me. Halfway up the stairs, her phone rang. She took it out. The screen showed Mr. Lin. The CFO, Mr. Lin, had worked at the company for 15 years. He had been there since old Mr. Su's time. His voice was always calm and steady. A call at this hour usually meant nothing good. She answered. President Su. Mr. Lin's voice had never been so sharp. It cracked from panic. Even through the phone, Vivian could hear him trembling. Something terrible happened. Vivian's grip tightened around the wine glass. Several drops of red wine splashed onto the stairs. What happened? Is there a problem with today's contract? Not the contract. It's the money. President Su, the company accounts speak clearly. They're empty. Mr. Lin was nearly shouting. His voice split. All capital pools, wealth management accounts, reserve funds, foreign exchange margin accounts, everything has been cleared out. A total of 28 billion yuan. At 5:48 this afternoon, it was transferred out in 16 transactions. President Su, tomorrow we have 340 million in supplier payments due. Next month's payroll. And the first installment for the South City Smart New District land, it's all gone. Not a single cent left. The wine glass slipped from Vivian's hand. Crystal hit the marble stairs and shattered. Red wine spilled across the carpet like blood and flowed down the steps. Who transferred it? She turned and rushed downstairs. Her bare feet stepped on broken glass, but she did not even notice. Who has that level of authority? The authorization keys are with me. I did not touch any of the 3 verification keys. Mr. Lin gasped on the other end. Only after several heavy breaths did he speak a complete sentence. It went through the highest authority channel. President Su, I have done accounts for 15 years. Today is the first time I have seen that channel light up. The authorizer displayed, Mr. Zhou. Zach Zhou. Vivian stopped midway down the stairs. She slowly turned her head and looked at the man still standing in the living room. At some point, Zach had removed the gauze from his face. The swelling had not fully gone down. But the curve at the corner of his mouth was one Vivian had never seen before. It was an extremely faint smile, hanging over his bruised lips like the first crack in a frozen lake. Vivian Su. He lifted his wrist and looked at his watch. It was an old Casio digital watch. The strap was worn and frayed. 11:23 p.m. Your company now has not 1 cent left in its accounts. Vivian staggered down from the stairs. The phone was still by her ear. Broken glass pierced her soles, but she did not lower her head. Her voice shook, yet she still forced herself to ask, Mr. Lin, check again. How could Zach have the highest authority? He works in logistics. He doesn't even have a finance system login password. President Su. Mr. Lin's voice suddenly became extremely complicated. Sour and bitter, as if he had swallowed an entire lemon. Mr. Zhou is not logistics. You need to look at the company's beside equity structure file. The craft paper envelope kept with the articles of association. You never opened it. What beside? What envelope? When the company was founded, old Mr. Su set up 2 equity systems. The public one shows you hold 51% and your father holds 49%. But there is another hidden structure inside the Cayman Family Trust. Mr. Lin's voice lowered. Almost a whisper. The sole authorized person for that structure is Zach Zhou. President Su, he is the company's true largest shareholder. Old Mr. Su transferred the authority to him 5 years ago. The condition was that he marry you. Vivian's pupils contracted violently. She suddenly remembered that afternoon 5 years ago. Her father had brought a young man in a plaid shirt before her. Wan Qing, this is Zach Zhou. What had her father's expression been then? Relieved. Like he had handed the heaviest key to the person he trusted most. Who exactly is he? Vivian's voice went hollow. I don't know. Mr. Lin swallowed. But 5 years ago, old Mr. Su said something to me. He said, Wan Qing will understand one day. But I hope she doesn't understand too late. The phone slid from Vivian's hand and hit the carpet without breaking. She turned back. Zach had already put on his jacket. That jacket was from Uniqlo, bought on discount for 199 yuan. Dark blue. Last week, she had even wanted to throw it away. Zach, her lips trembled. But she could not form a full sentence. Zach walked to the door and changed shoes. The soles of those sneakers were worn unevenly. His feet turned slightly outward when he walked. I married you because your father begged me. He pulled open the door. Night wind poured in, shaking the painting in the entryway. He said his daughter was too arrogant and needed someone who could hold her down. I owed your father a favor. So I agreed. He turned his head. Half his face was still swollen. The scab at the corner of his mouth cast a small shadow beneath his jaw. But in his eyes, Vivian finally saw something completely unfamiliar. Not endurance. Not weakness. A decision cold to the bone. 5 years. I managed that hidden system for you. I watched you build the company from mid-size to what it is now. I watched you hire that Chen guy. I watched him get closer and closer to you. I watched you slowly feel that I was in your way. He paused. The night wind flipped the hem of his jacket. "Those 3 slaps today, consider them the last bit of kindness I repay your father." He walked out. The door closed. Bang! The entire villa fell silent. The crystal chandelier illuminated the broken glass and red wine stains on the floor. The beautifully decorated living room looked like a smashed porcelain display case. Vivian leaned against the stair railing and slowly slid down to the ground. Glass cut into her palm. She did not cry out. She only stared at the closed door and the thin line of darkness beneath it. The phone rang again. Still Mr. Lin. President Su, his voice was hoarse, like sandpaper scraping iron. "There is one more thing. The government cooperation project we just signed today, the South City Smart New District land. The funder behind it is a fund controlled by Mr. Zhou. They just called to say the project is suspended. All preliminary investment will be claimed under the breach of contract clause. Penalty plus damages. Conservative estimate, another 5 billion loss." Vivian sat in the broken glass. Blood seeped from her soles and palms. The carpet was crimson. No one could tell if it was wine or blood. "Who exactly is he?" she asked the empty living room. Her voice was so light that only she could hear it. On the phone screen, Eric sent a WeChat message. "Wan Qing, I heard something happened at the company. Is it serious? Do you need me to come keep you company?" Vivian looked at that message. Suddenly, she remembered the afternoon when she ordered the bodyguards to slap Zach. Eric had stood nearby, smiling as he watched her count. He had even softly counted with her. 1, 2, 3. She did not reply. She placed the phone face down on the floor and looked up at the ceiling. The chandelier light shattered across her vision in tiny stars. Only one thought remained in her mind. Before Zach left tonight, his final words were not, "I hate you." He had said, 3 slaps. Just enough for you to remember this day. She suddenly realized the day he meant was not the day he had been humiliated. It was the day she lost everything. Wind rose outside. The shadows of the trees in the villa district swayed across the floor to ceiling windows. Like countless raised palms. Vivian did not sleep that night. Every light in the villa stayed on. Living room. Second floor corridor. Master bathroom. The house blazed with light. She sat on the sofa. Both soles were wrapped in gauze. So were her palms. She had dug the glass shards out one by one with tweezers using the first aid kit she found at dawn. Her hands trembled badly. It took 40 full minutes. On the coffee table lay more than a dozen documents. Copies of the equity structure Mr. Lin had sent overnight. Trust agreement summaries. Capital flow statements. And one yellowed contract attachment. The B-side file. At 3 in the morning, she finally found that craft paper envelope. There were no words on it. It had been clipped behind the final page of the business registration copy. For 5 years, she had never opened it. Inside was an English trust agreement with a Chinese translation attached. Article 5 was written clearly. The settler irrevocably grants full management authority over the target assets to trustee Mr. Zach Zhou. This authorization shall take effect upon signing and remain valid until otherwise agreed by both parties. In the signature field, her father's name was upright and powerful. The date was 3 days before her wedding. Vivian stared at that date for a long time. Before her father left for treatment in Switzerland, the last thing he did was hand the company to a man whose full name she had never cared to properly pronounce. What was she doing back then? She was having dinner with Eric, discussing wedding invitation designs. She was asking him to help choose bridesmaid dresses. She had not even asked Zach, "What size suit do you wear?" At dawn, she called Mr. Lin. "Uncle Lin, come over. Bring every financial record you can find." Mr. Lin arrived at 7. He stood in the entryway and did not even dare change shoes. His hair looked whiter than yesterday. His eyes were dark from lack of sleep. He held a document box. "President Su, everything is here." His voice was still hoarse. "We checked all night. Mr. Zhou's authority was personally signed by old Mr. Su 5 years ago. At the same time, old Mr. Su transferred overseas family assets, hidden company shares, and 3 backup capital pools into the offshore structure where Mr. Zhou is the sole authorized person. Those 3 capital pools were never disclosed in public financial statements. Old Mr. Su called them the safe." Vivian sat on the sofa wrapped in a blanket, face gray. "When did he move the money?" 5:48 p.m. yesterday. 16 transactions, each corresponding to one account. All triggered simultaneously through the emergency risk avoidance channel. That clause was also set by old Mr. Su. Mr. Lin swallowed. The trigger condition is, the authorized person suffers unlawful personal assault. Vivian's fingers tightened around the sofa armrest. Her nails sank into velvet. Personal assault? Those 3 slaps yesterday. Mr. Lin lowered his voice further. The boardroom cameras did not capture inside, but the hidden camera in the hallway caught 3 bodyguards entering. That camera was installed by old Mr. Su. It is hidden inside the artificial rock in the hallway flower pot. President Su, you definitely did not know about it. Even I didn't know until security pulled it out this morning. Vivian closed her eyes. She remembered another thing her father had said when he brought Zach to her 5 years ago. She had not paid attention then. Wanqing, live well with him from now on. And listen to his opinions on company matters. What had she replied? Dad, he can't even drink at a dinner table. What does he know about business? Old Mr. Su, she opened her eyes, bloodshot. Is he still in Switzerland? At the Lucerne nursing facility. I called him. His secretary said his health has not been good lately, so he cannot take calls. But, Mr. Lin opened the final page of the file. Old Mr. Su left a voice message yesterday afternoon and asked his secretary to send it to me this morning. Mr. Lin played it on speaker. Her father's voice came from the phone. Old, but clear. Each word weighed like it had been placed on a scale. Old Lin, when Xiao Zhou makes his move, tell him not to be too harsh. Leave Wanqing a little room. She is my daughter after all. Vivian froze. Then she understood. Her father knew. Her father not only knew Zach's authority. He knew when Zach would act. He did nothing to stop it. He only said, don't be too harsh. When did my father say he would come back? Mr. Lin shook his head. He didn't say. Vivian buried her face in her hands. The gauze on her palms rubbed against her face. The smell of disinfectant rushed into her nose. After a long time, she raised her head. Uncle Lin, how is the company today? Mr. Lin hesitated. At 9 this morning, Mr. Zhou held an emergency board meeting as the largest shareholder. The first person called into the conference room was Eric Chen. Audit. What? Vivian stood abruptly, and the blanket fell to the floor. What right does he have? He doesn't even have an official position in the company. Because of his now public shareholding ratio. Mr. Lin flipped to the last page of another document. After moving the funds yesterday, he simultaneously increased holdings by 15% of the company's publicly tradable shares through the overseas trust. Now, public and hidden shares together, he holds over 62%. President Su, he is the absolute controlling shareholder. If he wants to call a board meeting, he can. Vivian fell back onto the sofa. Why did he call Eric in? Internal audit. Mr. Zhou said that during Eric Chen's 3 years as financial secretary, several projects under his handling had abnormal fund flows. He initiated a full audit. Also, Mr. Lin's voice lowered. Mr. Zhou said the entire meeting will be recorded. Everyone related to yesterday's incident will be invited in one by one. Vivian stared at the floor. The red wine stain on the carpet had dried overnight, becoming a dark brown mark. She remembered herself standing in that room yesterday, wearing a Chanel suit, counting, 1, 2, 3. Each count had been crisp and clean. Where is he now? In the boardroom. Drive. Now. On the way to the company, Vivian made 20 phone calls. Zach's phone was off. The boardroom landline was not answered. She even called Mr. Lin's phone while he sat beside her. Mr. Lin held up the phone awkwardly. President Su, Mr. Zhou said he is not seeing guests this morning. When she rushed into the company lobby, the young receptionist shrank back in fright. President Su, Mr. Zhou said, move. Vivian entered the elevator directly. Mr. Lin trotted after her. In the elevator, the mirrored stainless steel panel reflected her appearance. She was still wearing yesterday's dress. There were wine stains on the hem. Several strands of hair had fallen loose. Her eye sockets were blue. Her lipstick was long gone. She froze briefly at her own reflection. But there was no time to care. The elevator stopped at the 18th floor. The doors opened. She saw 7 or 8 people standing in the hallway. All were mid to senior level managers, department directors, project managers. deputy finance managers. Each held a document or phone. Every face was pale. President Su is here. President Su, what exactly is going on? Finance sent an email this morning saying payroll may be delayed. President Su, our department budget has been frozen. My project alone has 20 million in payments blocked. President Su. Vivian pushed through the crowd. Her heel struck the marble floor urgently like drumbeats. She reached the boardroom door. The glass door was closed. The blinds were half open. She saw Zach seated at the head of the table. That was the seat she usually occupied. The swelling on his face had mostly gone down. There was still bruising on his left cheek, and the scab at the corner of his mouth had become a thin line. He wore a dark gray suit. Sharp tailoring. Navy tie. His cufflinks gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights. She had never seen him dressed this well. That suit changed his entire presence. His shoulders looked straight. His back relaxed and open. Even that slight hunch he usually carried was gone. Eric sat at the other end of the long table, face whiter than paper. Before him lay a stack of printed bank statements. Beside them was a black voice recorder with its indicator light flashing. Zach was speaking. His voice came through the glass door. Not loud. But the entire hallway could hear. Secretary Chen, this 30 million yuan payment went to Wanha Trading, a company registered under your cousin's name. According to business registration information, this company has registered capital of 500,000, paid in capital of 0, was established 4 months ago, and has reported 0 income. When you approved this payment, you used a copy of President Su's authorization seal. But President Su was not in the company that day. The seal was in your drawer. Explain. Eric's lips trembled twice. His throat rolled. That was verbally approved by President Su. She called me that day and told me. I completed the process the next day, verbally. Zach smiled faintly and leaned back. His hands folded on the table. President Su called me 20 times from last night until this morning. Do you think she currently has time to verbally approve anything for you? Eric turned abruptly. He saw Vivian through the glass door. His eyes lit up like a drowning man seeing a piece of driftwood, then grew even more panicked. Wan Qing. Hurry and come in. Tell them that money really was approved by you. Quick. Vivian pushed open the door. Her high heels sounded especially sharp in the open conference room. The echo hit the walls and bounced back. She looked at Eric. Then at Zach. Zach leaned back in the chair. The shoulder line of his dark gray suit was smooth as a blade. He looked at her with eyes flat as if he were looking at a stranger. That calmness was colder than anger. President Su is here. He said without any emotional rise. Perfect timing. You tell us. That 30 million yuan project payment for Eric Chen, did you know about it, or not? Vivian opened her mouth. Of course she did not know. She had never even heard of Wanha Trading. But Eric was her high school classmate. He was the man she had personally promoted from sales assistant to financial secretary. He was the man for whom she had publicly ordered her own husband slapped 3 times yesterday. Everyone in the room was watching her. 7 directors. 3 independent supervisors. Legal director. Audit chief. More than a dozen eyes nailed onto her face. Outside the door, managers squeezed together, looking in through the glass. Dozens of faces overlapped. Vivian gripped her handbag. Her knuckles turned white. At the time, I agreed by phone. It has been too long. I don't remember the details. Zach nodded. Good. You don't remember. He pressed a button on the table. The projector lit up. An audio waveform appeared on the white wall. Then you should remember this recording. The recording had been exported from Eric's phone. The sound quality was terrifyingly clear. Even Eric's swallowing was captured. I'll help you handle the money for your cousin. 30 million will go through project funds. I can get Vivian Su's seal whenever I want. Her useless husband moves boxes in logistics every day and doesn't care about anything. Don't worry. I can handle Vivian. Eric's voice was clear. The conference room was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioner could be heard. Also the sound of someone swallowing. Vivian turned and looked at Eric. His face had gone completely white. As white as wall paint. He suddenly stood, chair legs scraping sharply across the floor. Wan Qing, listen to me. That recording is taken out of context. I was just reassuring my cousin. In reality, that money, what reality? Zach did not look at him. He looked only at Vivian. President Sue, you slapped me 3 times for him. Now tell me, were those 3 slaps worth 30 million? Vivian's nails dug into her palm. Blood seeped through the gauze. She remembered herself standing in the center of this room yesterday, watching each bodyguard swing their palms down. Back then, Eric had stood half a step behind her. She remembered the curve at the corner of his mouth clearly. Zach. Her voice was dry, like sandpaper scraping her throat. What exactly do you want? Zach stood. He was a head taller than her. When he rose, the chair slid back half an inch. Vivian instinctively stepped back. I don't want anything. He glanced at his watch. It was a different watch. A deep brown leather strap. A simple dial. I am only exercising shareholder rights. First, Eric Chen is suspected of embezzlement and forging company documents. I have already called the police. The Economic Crime Investigation Unit will arrive in 20 minutes. Second, as the legal representative of the company, you failed in supervision. The board will initiate a no-confidence voting process. Third, he looked down at his phone. A new message popped up. After reading it, the corner of his mouth curved slightly. Third, your father called. He asked me to pass you a message. Vivian stared at him. Her breathing became rapid. Zach turned the phone screen toward her. It was a speech-to-text message from someone saved as Old Master. Wanqing, 5 years ago, Dad handed the company to you and Zach, not so you could use it to raise your high school classmate. I know about the 3 slaps. Take care of yourself. Vivian's legs weakened. Her hand caught the edge of the table. My father knows? He knows. Zach locked the phone and put it back into his pocket. He has always known. You thought no one told your father what you were doing inside the company? Vivian Sue, that camera your father installed is not only in the hallway. There is one under the money tree in your office too. Vivian's pupils contracted. What do you mean? What do I mean? Zach lowered his head. For the first time, there was a trace of emotion in his eyes. A faint disappointment. Like tea that had gone completely cold. Vivian Sue, all the things you said to Eric in your office, your father heard them. When you called me useless, your father was listening from Switzerland. When you said this marriage was a joke, he heard that too. He did not stop you because he thought one day you would understand. Vivian's lips began to tremble. Zach walked around the table and stopped before Eric. Eric shrank backward. The chair almost flipped. His hands waved wildly. Don't come over. Don't come over. I called the police, I won't hit you. Zach looked down at him. From that height, Eric curled in the chair like a shrimp with its spine pulled out. You encouraged those 3 slaps. But I won't hit you. Because hitting you would dirty my hand. But I will send every audit report to the Economic Crime Investigation Unit. How much you swallowed over the years, I will make you spit it out with interest. 30,000. 300,000. 30 million. I have calculated every cent for you. He turned and walked out. When he passed Vivian, he paused. His gaze fell on her trembling shoulders. Still living in that villa? Vivian said nothing. She could not even lift her head. That house belongs to your father. I won't touch it. But you no longer decide whether it gets renovated next month. Your father sent me a second message this morning. Zach paused. Take back the house. Give her 3 months to clean up her own mess. Zach walked out. The people in the hallway automatically moved aside for him. Everyone stepped back when he passed. Their gazes followed his back. He walked toward the elevator slowly, each step steady. Vivian stood in place. Behind her, Eric cried incoherently, Wanqing. Wanqing, say something for me. You two are married, shut up. Vivian's voice was very soft. She stared at Zach's back until the elevator doors closed. In the final gap before the silver-gray doors met, she caught the last sliver of his side profile. Dark gray suit. Straight nose bridge. The thin scar at the corner of his mouth. For 5 years, she had never truly looked at his face. Only today did she realize this was what he looked like. Then she remembered something. In the first year of their marriage, her father had once sent her a message from Switzerland. At that time, she had just transferred Zach to logistics and was celebrating with Eric over dinner. After 2 glasses of wine, she replied to her father, Dad, he can't even drink. What ability does he have? Her father never replied. Now she knew. He had not replied because there was nothing left to say. The elevator doors closed completely. Vivian looked down at her own hands. Inside her handbag, her phone screen lit up. Eric's unread messages had climbed to 89. She did not open a single one. She turned the phone face down on the table. When she raised her head, she found the entire conference room looking at her. Directors, supervisors, legal, audit, and the managers and employees crowded at the doorway. Every face had the same expression: shock, realization, and an emotion she had never seen on their faces before. Gloating. The hallway remained silent for about 10 seconds. Then someone whispered, "President Su had Mr. Zhou slapped yesterday for that traitor Eric Chen? I heard she even told Mr. Zhou to resign." Did she really not know who Mr. Zhou was, or was she pretending? 5 years under the same roof with her husband, and she didn't know what he did? Now the company is gone. Not just the company. If the footage of those 3 slaps leaks, workplace bullying alone will destroy public opinion. Market value will drop again. Vivian clenched her fists. Blood beads seeped through the gauze. She turned and faced the room. "Go back to work." No one moved. "I said go back to work." Only then did the crowd slowly disperse. But everyone who passed her still looked at her from the corner of their eyes. Those gazes were like needles, one by one stabbing into her back. She stood alone in the empty hallway. Noon light poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, leaving no shadow on her. She looked like a specimen pinned in white light. She took out her phone and scrolled to a number without a saved name. In 5 years of marriage, she had never saved a contact name for him. Just a string of digits at the bottom of her contacts. She dialed. It rang 3 times. He answered. "Something else?" His voice was faint. Like he was speaking across a river. The suit you wore at the meeting this morning. Where did it come from?" The other end paused. Then she heard a soft laugh. No warmth. Like he had remembered some meaningless detail. "Every year, when you bought clothes for your father, the brand would send extra sample menswear. You never looked. You always had someone put them in the closet. I took one each year. Saved 5 suits. Today was the first." Vivian froze. She remembered. The brand did send an extra gift piece every season. She thought they were backup items for her father. She always had the housekeeper put them into the deepest compartment of the cloakroom. She had never opened them. "Zach, Vivian Su." He interrupted her. His tone suddenly tightened. "There is nothing left to say between us. Those 3 slaps wiped away the last of my affection. I have repaid your father's favor. As for your company, I will not pursue your personal liability. But you had better pray the Economic Crime Investigation Unit finds no fund transfers between you and Eric. If you are connected to that 30 million, I will not show mercy. I never touched that money." "Then good," he said. "Goodbye." "Wait." Vivian gripped the phone. Her knuckles turned white. "Who exactly are you? Why did my father give the company to you? What did you do before marrying me?" "You, a logistics worker who moved boxes." The other end went silent for a few seconds. His breathing came evenly. Finally, he spoke softly. "What I did before, ask your father. Or search 4 words online. Vermilion Capital." The call ended. The busy tone sounded like a chain of ellipses. Vivian's fingers stiffened in midair. Vermilion Capital. Of course she knew that name. No one in business did not. Asia's largest unlisted enterprise investment institution. Its leader was mysterious as fog. Known only by name, never by face. Rumor said the boss held assets worth hundreds of billions. The projects he handled were all trillion-level infrastructure and energy deals. But no one had ever seen his true face. Every public appearance was made by agents. Name, age, appearance all hidden. She had once discussed it with her father. 3 years ago, at New Year's Eve dinner, Zach was washing dishes in the kitchen while she and her father sat in the living room watching TV. A financial news segment mentioned Vermilion Capital investing in another major project. "Dad, who exactly is the boss behind Vermilion Capital? Why is he so mysterious?" Her father had held a cup of pu'er tea and slowly looked up at her. "A young man. A very capable young man." "How capable?" 10,000 times more capable than you." She thought her father was joking. She had acted spoiled and said, "Dad, you're exaggerating." Her father did not speak again. He only finished that cup of tea. Vivian slowly crouched and placed the phone on the floor. Then covered her face with both hands. She crouched in the middle of the hallway. Sunlight shrank her into a small shadow. At the end of the hallway, the cleaning lady pushed her cart past. Seeing Vivian crouched there, she froze. Then silently took another route. The wheels rolled over the floor. Gurgle. Gurgle. That afternoon at 3, the Economic Crime Investigation Unit arrived. When Eric was taken out of the conference room, his legs were weak. 2 uniformed officers held him by the arms, one on each side. He was still struggling. Veins bulged in his neck. He shouted, "I want a lawyer. I was framed. Vivian Sue, say something." Vivian stood at the end of the hallway. She watched Eric being dragged past. His face was twisted, tears and snot mixing together. She remembered high school. Eric had sat behind her and passed her cheat sheets during every exam. He always smiled that pleasing smile. Later, when her father forced her to marry, Eric said, "It's okay, Wanqing. I'll wait for you." Later still, he entered the company and called her President Sue with every sentence. The things in his eyes, she had never seen them clearly. Now she did. She said nothing. When Eric was pushed into the elevator, he looked back at her one last time. His gaze was complicated. Hatred, begging, unwillingness, and a touch of desperate mockery. The elevator doors closed. Vivian returned to her office, closed the door, and pulled down all the blinds. She sat at her desk. On the computer screen was the audit brief Mr. Lin had just sent. At least 5 projects handled by Eric had problems. Preliminary amount, over 120 million yuan. And that was only the tip of the iceberg. She did not read the second page. She opened a search engine and typed 4 words, Vermilion Capital. Tens of thousands of results appeared. News, reports, analysis, forum posts. She scrolled one by one, faster and faster. Vermilion Capital. Founded 12 years ago. Initial registered capital unknown. Current assets under management estimated by third parties at over 400 billion. Investment coverage, energy, infrastructure, high-end manufacturing, biotechnology. Public information showed its portfolio included 3 trillion yuan listed companies, 2 national strategic projects, and at least 6 unicorns. But in all reports, the founder had only one code name. Z. No photo. No interview. No public appearance. Only a vague description circulated in financial circles. Male, around 30, about 180 centimeters tall, extremely strong presence. Speaks slowly, but every word carries weight. Vivian stared at the screen. She thought of how Zach spoke. Slowly. Like he was chewing a piece of sugar that would never melt. She used to dislike his way of speaking, thinking he dragged things out. Now she knew it was not dragging. She scrolled down. At the end of one in-depth report, there was an interview excerpt. The interviewee was the head of a state-backed investment institution. "I met Mr. Z from Vermilion once. Only once, 3 years ago in Hong Kong. At the time, he wore a gray t-shirt and looked like an ordinary college student. But after he said 3 sentences, I knew the cards in his hand were 10 times more than mine. Later, my instinct proved correct. He made 12 billion on that project. I only got a sip of soup." Vivian closed the page. She leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Gray t-shirt. 3 years ago, there had indeed been a gray t-shirt in Zach's closet. It looked cheap. She had complained it was ugly and told him to throw it away. He had not thrown it out. Later, she never saw it again. She opened her phone again and found Zach's number. The call record showed the afternoon call lasted 1 minute and 12 seconds. She stared at the string of digits. Her thumb hovered above the dial button, but she never pressed it. She did not know what to say. Ask him why he hid it for 5 years? Ask him why, if he was this powerful, he spent every day moving boxes in logistics? Ask what he was thinking yesterday while taking those 3 slaps? What right did she have to ask? Someone knocked on the office door. Mr. Lin's voice came through the wood. "President Sue, the board sent notice. Emergency shareholders meeting at 3 this afternoon. Mr. Zhou will preside." Vivian closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she stood and walked to the money tree in the office. She crouched, pushed aside the soil near the roots, and searched. After 2 tries, her finger touched something hard. She dug it out. A black camera the size of a fingernail was embedded in the groove of the artificial rock, lens aimed directly at her desk. The power line ran along the inner wall of the pot, hidden beneath soil. She crouched there and held the camera for a long time. Sunlight squeezed in through the blinds and fell across the back of her hand. Her father. Her father had been watching her since 5 years ago. Watching her transfer Zach to logistics. Watching her laugh and talk with Eric in the office. Watching her step by step turn this family and this company into what they were now. Vivian placed the camera back in its original spot, patted the soil from her hands, and stood. "I know," she said softly to the money tree. At 3 in the afternoon, emergency shareholders meeting. Vivian sat in the deputy seat. Beside her, the chairman's seat was empty. Zach had not arrived yet. Below sat more than 100 shareholder representatives and institutional investors. The room was crowded. Whispers buzzed like a swarm of bees. Everyone was looking at Vivian. Their eyes carried every possible emotion. At 3:02, the conference room door opened from outside. Zach walked in. He wore a second suit. Navy blue. Matching tie. The bruise on his face had not fully faded. Under the lights, it still showed faintly. But that trace of injury only added something unspeakable to his presence. Like a blade that had just finished fighting. The room went quiet for a moment. Then exploded. Isn't that the Sue family's live-in son-in-law? Why is he sitting at the chairman's seat? Finance has been talking all morning. They say all the company's money was transferred away by him. What? How does he have that authority? Zach reached the chairman's seat and sat down. He did not pick up the microphone. He merely leaned forward slightly. His voice covered the whole room. "Shareholders, I am Zach Zhou. I currently hold 62.3% of Sue Group's shares and am the company's largest shareholder. Today's emergency shareholders meeting is to announce several matters." He did not speak fast. But every word hit the ground and did not bounce. The room quieted. First. Former Financial Secretary Eric Chen is suspected of embezzlement involving over 100 million yuan. The Economic Crime Investigation Unit officially opened a case this afternoon. The relevant audit report will be sent to every shareholder present within 48 hours. He paused and swept his eyes across the room. Second. Ms. Vivian Su, the company's legal representative, bears responsibility for regulatory failure in this incident. The board has initiated a no-confidence voting procedure. The results will be announced within 7 days. Third. He lowered his eyes to the document on the table. Regarding the company's future operations, as the nominee for new executive director, I will submit a restructuring plan. The core of the plan is to introduce Vermilion Capital as a strategic investor. Capital injection, 15 billion yuan. In exchange for 35% of newly issued shares, while integrating existing business lines. The room exploded again. Someone stood up. "Vermilion Capital? What right do you have to bring in Vermilion Capital?" Zach flipped the folder before him to the first page and turned it toward the projector. On screen appeared a letter of intent stamped with Vermilion Capital's official seal. The red stamp was bright. "Because the authorized person for Vermilion Capital is me." His tone was flat. "I signed this letter of intent." Dead silence. Vivian sat in the deputy seat. Her nails sank deep into her palm. She looked at the letter on the screen. At the flourish signature at the bottom, Zach Zhou. The expressions of the shareholders below were spectacular. Some mouths opened into O shapes. Some glasses slipped to the bridge of their noses. Some dropped their phones and forgot to pick them up. For more than 10 seconds, the air conditioner was the only sound. Then someone shouted, "Vermilion Capital is him. The mysterious Mr. Z is him. Damn, the Su family's son-in-law hid for 5 years? 5 years. He moved boxes in logistics for 5 years. Did Vivian Su know?" Every gaze turned toward Vivian. She sat there with her back straight. Face pale. Lips tightly pressed. She did not look at anyone. Only at Zach's side profile. Zach did not look back. He lowered his head, turned a page, and began explaining the details of the restructuring plan. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When it ended, shareholders left in 2s and 3s. Every group passing Vivian looked at her a little longer. Some wanted to speak but stopped. Others did not bother hiding their gloating. President Sue, oh, we can't call her President Sue anymore. Her husband is the boss of Vermilion Capital, and she kicked him aside. She even had him slapped 3 times. Tisk, Vivian sat still. Only after everyone had left did the conference room empty out, leaving only her and Zach. Zach was still organizing the documents on the table. He stacked the files into his briefcase one by one. Calmly. Closed the zipper. Fastened the buckle. Stood. Zach. Vivian spoke. He stopped and turned to look at her. You spent 5 years moving boxes in logistics. Were you not wronged? Zach lowered his eyes and looked at her. There was no warmth in his gaze. He shifted the briefcase to his left hand and smoothed the hem of his suit with his right. I was. He said. But not because of the boxes. Because you never once asked me, are you tired today? Vivian's eyes suddenly burned. She turned her face away and clenched her teeth to keep the tears from falling. You can go. She said. Zach turned and left. The sound of his leather shoes on the marble floor grew farther and farther away. Then the elevator doors swallowed it. Vivian sat alone in the empty conference room. On the chairman's seat, he had left behind a notebook. Dark blue cover. The lower right corner printed with Sue Group's logo. She walked over and picked it up. Opened the first page. There was only one line. It was Zach's handwriting. She recognized it. He always signed slowly and firmly. 5th year. Wearing the first suit today. Below it was yesterday's date. Vivian closed the notebook and clutched it in her hand. She did not cry. She simply stood before the chairman's seat, one hand on the back of the chair, for a long time. Outside the window, night fell. 3 days later, Vivian moved out of the villa. She took only one suitcase of clothes, a few books, and that dark blue notebook. She left a key for the cleaning lady and asked her to come clean the remaining things when she had time. She temporarily rented an apartment near the company. Mr. Lin helped her find it. Monthly rent, $20,000. She paid it herself. She had a little over $1 million left in her bank account, her private savings over the years. Only after checking the balance did she discover that in addition to the allowance she had assigned him, Zach had been transferring a fixed amount into her household card every month. 50,000 yuan. Note, Mom's medical expenses. The note used her way of saying Mom, not your mom. She stared at that bank record for a long time. From the first month her mother moved into the special care ward, that transfer had been there. She had always assumed it was a company welfare reimbursement. She never asked. Eric's case progressed quickly. The Economic Crime Investigation Unit found at least 7 abnormal transfers through his cousin's Wanha trading account. Total, 170 million yuan. Of that, 30 million came from Sue Group project funds. The rest had been skimmed from other company projects. The afternoon Eric was officially arrested, Vivian received a text from an unfamiliar number. Miss Sue, I am Eric's cousin. My brother asked me to pass you a message. He said sorry. Vivian read it. Then deleted it. Zach's restructuring plan passed at the shareholders' meeting with overwhelming votes. The day Vermilion Capital's 15 billion yuan investment arrived, Sue Group's stock hit the daily limit up. Financial news flooded the internet. Headlines changed overnight from Sue Group deep in management scandal to Vermilion Capital takes control of Sue Group. Mysterious Mr. Z finally revealed. The image attached was Zach at the signing ceremony, wearing his 3rd suit. Navy. Dark gray striped tie. Hair cut shorter. The bruise on his left cheek had faded to only a shallow mark. The comments section under the photo was even livelier than the article itself. 5 years. He pretended to be a useless son-in-law for 5 years. I still remember Vivian Sue's face at the wedding. She looked so disgusted. Does her face hurt now? 3 slaps cost her 28 billion. Those were expensive slaps. Not 28 billion. More than 30 billion if you count the 5 billion penalty, plus the premium from Vermilion's investment. I calculated it. Mr. Zhou made at least 40 billion in this wave. A true master. This is what a real master looks like. Where is Vivian Sue now? Vivian was in the hospital. Her mother lived in the special care ward in the east side of the city. She used to come once a month, swipe her card, sit for 10 minutes, and leave. Today, when she arrived, she did not need to pay. The nurse said Mr. Zhou had prepaid 5 years of fees. She walked to the ward door and looked through the glass window. Her mother lay in bed. An oxygen tube rested against her nose. She was quiet. On the bedside table stood a bouquet of fresh lilies in a transparent vase. The buds had only half bloomed. "Who sent them?" she asked the nurse. "Mr. Zhou." The nurse smiled. "He comes every Wednesday, sits for half an hour, talks to Auntie a little, then leaves." "Miss Sue, you didn't know? He has been coming for 5 years. Every Wednesday afternoon, without fail." Vivian stood at the door and did not go in. She looked at those lilies. Their stems were soaked in water. Fine roots stretched beneath the surface. 5 years. She had never stayed with her mother for more than 20 minutes. But the man she had called useless for 5 years came every Wednesday afternoon and sat for half an hour. She pushed open the door and entered, sitting beside the bed. Her mother was still asleep. Her face peaceful. Vivian held her mother's hand. It was thin enough to be only bones. The skin was as thin as paper. "Mom," she whispered. "Am I especially terrible?" Only the beeping heart monitor answered her. She sat there for an hour. When she stood to leave, she ran into Zach in the hallway. He wore casual clothes. Gray hoodie. Jeans. In his hand was a thermos container. Seeing her, his steps paused. "My mother," Vivian spoke first. "Thank you." "No need." Zach shifted the thermos to his other hand. "Your mother likes Crucian carp soup. I used to bring it from home, and she always finished it. You don't need to come. I will continue taking care of her." "Zach," I said, "no need." He lifted his eyes. His gaze was calm. "Your mother is a good person. When I used to eat at your house, she served me food. She deserves to be cared for. It has nothing to do with you." He walked around her and entered the ward. He placed the thermos on the bedside table, bent down, and said something to her mother. Through the glass, Vivian saw the corner of her mother's mouth move slightly, as if smiling. Vivian turned and left. Her high heels struck the floor. Tap, tap, tap. One sound after another, as if counting something. 1 week later, Vivian resigned from all company positions. She did not attend the board vote. She submitted her resignation voluntarily. Mr. Lin personally drove her to complete the resignation procedures. On the way, he wanted to speak several times, but in the end only sighed. "Miss Sue." He used that title. "Old Mr. Sue called yesterday. He said find a time to go home. He is waiting for you in Switzerland." Vivian looked out at the flowing street scene and did not turn back. "He knows I resigned?" "He knows." Mr. Lin paused. Old Mr. Sue said, "If Wanqing can take this step, she can still be saved." Vivian closed her eyes. Sunlight entered through the car window and warmed her face. She suddenly felt like she had not stood in the sun for a very long time. That afternoon, after finishing the resignation procedure, she returned to the villa to pack the last things. The furniture had not changed, but the divorce agreement still lay on the coffee table. She had signed it when she left. But Zach had never filed the paperwork. She asked a lawyer. The lawyer said Mr. Zhou had no record of submitting a divorce application. He didn't file it? Vivian froze. Mr. Zhou said to leave it for now. The lawyer's words were cautious. He said to wait until you handle everything and are calm enough to talk. Vivian picked up the agreement and flipped through it. The line she had written, "What do you have to split?" was still there. Messy handwriting. She found a pen and wrote another line under it. "I don't want anything. I only want one, sorry." She wrote the word, sorry. Thought for a moment. Then crossed it out. Beside it, she drew a circle. Exactly like the circle Zach had left on one of his notes. She took a photo and sent it to Zach. 2 minutes later, he replied. Received. When you find the sentence you truly want to say, we'll talk. Vivian looked at that message and placed the phone face down on her knees. Outside, plain tree leaves covered the ground. Wind rolled them up with a rustling sound. She suddenly remembered the day she first met him 5 years ago. It had also been autumn. He wore a light blue shirt and stood in her father's study. His hands were folded before him. His head slightly lowered. At the time, she had taken one glance and thought, this person is so dull. Now she finally understood. He was not dull. He had simply seen through her too clearly. So clearly that everything about her was exposed before him, and he had no desire even to expose it. For the next 2 months, Vivian did one thing. She locked herself in that small apartment, opened a blank document, and wrote word by word. She wrote about how she had seen Zach over the past 5 years. Her arrogance. Her ambiguous relationship with Eric. She wrote slowly. After every paragraph, she deleted and rewrote. She did not want to defend herself. Did not want to complain. She only wanted to peel open, layer by layer, the things she had never truly faced. By the 3rd month, she had written an open letter. She thought about the opening for a long time. In the end, she wrote only 4 words: "My name is Vivian Sue." Then she confessed. She wrote about how, on the first day after marriage, she transferred Zach to logistics. She wrote about how, in 5 years, she had never once asked whether he was cold, warm, tired, or hungry. She wrote about arranging Eric into the company. She wrote about the words she and Eric had said in her office. The things they had done. She wrote about the day Eric encouraged her to have Zach slapped. How, deep down, she faintly knew something was wrong. But did not stop it. She wrote more than 3,000 words. At the end, she wrote, "Zach Joe, I do not ask for your forgiveness. I only want everyone to know, the person wronged in these 5 years was you, not me. The 3 slaps I gave did not destroy your dignity. They destroyed my own." She posted the open letter on the company intranet. She retained intranet access because the company charter granted former legal representatives permanent access rights. She posted it at 3 in the morning. After posting, she turned off the computer and went to sleep. The next morning, her phone exploded. Mr. Lin called 20 times. Former co-workers sent hundreds of messages. Even several financial media reporters found her new number through various connections. She answered none of them. She muted the phone and went out for breakfast. When she returned, she saw a new unread message. The sender was a string of numbers she knew by heart. I read the letter. Only 4 words. Vivian stared at those 4 words for 10 minutes. She did not know what they meant. Forgiven? Not forgiven? Read, and then what? She did not reply. She placed the phone on the coffee table and went to the kitchen for water. When she returned, the screen lit up again. Second message, 2 in the afternoon. Old place. Vivian's hand shook around the glass. After thinking, she replied 1 word. Okay. At 1:50 p.m., she arrived at the company. She wore a simple white shirt and black trousers. Hair tied in a ponytail. No makeup. She stood in the lobby, watching employees come and go. No one recognized her. Or maybe some recognized her but pretended not to. She went up to the 18th floor. The hallway was quiet. No crowd. No whispers. She reached the boardroom door. It was open. Zach sat inside. Before him were 2 cups. 1 Tiguanyin tea. 1 plain water. The Tiguanyin was for her. The water was his. Sit. He said. Vivian sat opposite him. Across the 3-meter conference table, she saw that the bruises on his face were completely gone. The thin scar at the corner of his mouth had faded to almost nothing. He wore that gray t-shirt. The one she had told him to throw away 3 years ago. Your hair is longer, she said. Zach touched the back of his head. Should cut it. They were silent for a while. The sunlight outside was good, falling across the tabletop. Steam rose from the teacup. Your mother will be discharged next Wednesday, Zach said. The doctor says she's recovering well. She can transfer from special care to a regular ward. If you are willing, you can take care of her from now on. I'm willing. Vivian answered immediately. Zach nodded and lifted his cup of water for a sip. When he set the cup down, his thumb rubbed lightly along the rim. Vivian had seen that gesture countless times before. She used to think it was dirty. That his habit of touching the cup rim was disgusting. Now she knew it was a subconscious movement he made when nervous. That letter. He said. You wrote it honestly. I didn't lie. I know. He leaned back and looked out the window. But what do you plan to do from now on? You're not going back to the company. You need to care for your mother. You should have something of your own. Vivian was silent for a moment. I want to take a certification exam again. In finance. I've forgotten most of what I learned before. I want to pick it back up. Zach turned to look at her. There was something in his eyes she could not read. Surprise. Maybe relief. But only for an instant. Good. He stood. Then do what you need to do. I have a meeting this afternoon. He walked around the table toward the door. When he passed beside her, he stopped for half a second. She smelled him. A faint scent of laundry detergent. The same as the unopened shirt in her closet. Zach. She called him. He turned. I'm sorry. She said. Only 3 words. But she had practiced for 3 months to say them this smoothly. Zach looked at her for a long time. So long she thought he would not answer. Finally, he said only that one word. Then he walked out. Vivian sat alone in the boardroom. The Tiguanyin before her had cooled to warm. She lifted it and took a sip. It had the orchid fragrance she liked. She had once casually told him, Tiguanyin only tastes good with an orchid note. She had mentioned it once and never expected him to remember. She finished the tea. Then stood and left the boardroom. At the end of the hallway, sunlight slanted in, stretching her shadow thin and long across the floor. She stepped into that light. Her high heels sounded steadier than they had 3 months ago. In the 4th month, Eric's case was sentenced. Embezzlement established. The amount was especially huge. 15 years in prison. 5 million yuan fine. All illegal gains confiscated. On the day of sentencing, Vivian went to the courthouse. She sat in the last row of the gallery. When Eric was brought out, he had lost a lot of weight. His beard was messy. When he saw her, he froze. Then turned his face away. After the hearing ended, Vivian stood for a while on the courthouse steps. Early winter wind was cold. She tightened her coat around herself. Someone walked up behind her and handed her a cup of hot coffee. She turned. Mr. Lin stood there and pressed the coffee into her hand. Uncle Lin, you worry more than I do. I'm used to worrying. Mr. Lin smiled. White hair moved in the wind. Old Mr. Su called again yesterday. He asked when you're going to Switzerland. Next month. Vivian held the coffee to warm her hands. After I settle my mother. Mr. Lin nodded, wanting to speak but stopping. Vivian knew what he wanted to ask. You want to ask about Zach? And no. Mr. Lin waved his hand. I was just casually, he's doing well. Vivian took a sip of coffee. I went to the hospital last week to see my mother and ran into him. He brought Crucian carp soup again. Mr. Lin thought for a moment but did not finish. Vivian knew what he wanted to say. Zach was the type who carried things through to the end. When ruthless, he was ruthless completely. But he never failed to leave the margin he should leave. He transferred all company funds away. But he had Vermilion advance 3 months of employee salaries. He sent Eric to prison. But for Eric's cousin's company, he only recovered illegal gains and did not pursue joint liability. Did he slap her once in return? No. He used the most ruthless way to make her slap herself. That hurt the most. Let's go, Uncle Lin. She threw the coffee cup into the trash. Take me back. The car drove down the road. On the radio, financial news was playing. Vermilion Capital has announced completion of Su Group's full restructuring. New Executive Director Mr. Zach Zhou will personally attend next month's industry summit, where he will give his first public media interview. Vivian leaned back with her eyes closed and listened. She thought of the divorce agreement still lying on the coffee table. She had written, sorry. He had replied, received. Then neither of them mentioned it again. People at the company were guessing whether they had divorced. Some said yes, because Mr. Zhou had moved out. Some said no, because Vivian still carried the Su name. Only she knew. The paper was still on the coffee table. Neither of them had touched it. Uncle Lin. She suddenly opened her eyes. Do you know what Vermilion's fund behind the South City project was called? What? The one controlled by Mr. Zhou. The funder for the South City project. I just realized I never paid attention to the name. Mr. Lin glanced at her through the rearview mirror. It is called Homeward Boat. Homeward as in returning home. Boat as in vessel. Vivian's fingers paused on her knee. Homeward Boat. She remembered the first mid-autumn festival after her marriage. Her father had sent a postcard from Switzerland. The front was a view of Lake Lucerne. On the back, he wrote a line of poetry, one day, long winds will break the waves. With cloud-like sails, we cross the sea. She had casually stuffed the postcard into a drawer and forgotten about it. But she remembered the whole poem. The road is hard, the road is hard. So many forks. Where am I now? One day, long winds will break the waves. With cloud-like sails, we cross the sea. Homeward boat. He had been waiting. Waiting 5 years for the day she could see his boat clearly. Vivian turned her face toward the window. Trees along the highway retreated quickly. Winter sunlight slipped through the clouds and scattered into the car. Her nose suddenly stung. But she did not let the tears fall. She owed him too much. Too much for one, sorry, to be enough. But at least she had begun to repay. An open letter. A promise. A sincere apology. That was all she could do. The rest would be left to time. Uncle Lin. She said. When I go to Switzerland next month, can you help me ask someone? Who? Zach. Ask whether he is willing to go with me to see my father. Mr. Lin was silent for a few seconds. Then smiled. Okay. I'll ask. The car turned onto the ramp, heading toward the apartment. In the rearview mirror, Sue Group's 38-story building grew farther and farther away. This time, Vivian did not look back. She knew that building was no longer hers. Its owner now carried the surname Zhou. He wore dark gray suits and sat at the chairman's seat, more commanding than any director she had ever seen. And she was finally beginning to learn how to become someone worthy of standing beside him. On the day of the industry summit, Vivian went. She had no invitation. Mr. Lin arranged a temporary observer pass for her. She sat near the aisle in the third row from the back, wearing an ordinary camel coat, blending into a group of investors. On stage, Zach was being interviewed. It was his first public media interview. More than 300 people sat below. Financial media cameras lined up in 3 full rows. He wore his 4th suit. Dark gray. Subtle pattern tie. Matte silver cufflinks. He sat in the interview chair, relaxed, legs slightly crossed. His speaking pace was still that slow rhythm. The host asked, Mr. Zhou, the outside world is very curious. Why did you stay behind the scenes at Sue Group for 5 years? Zach paused. Everyone below perked up. Because I owed someone a favor. His voice was not loud. But the microphone delivered every word clearly. That person handed me the most important key and said, watch over her for me. I agreed. That person is? Zach did not answer directly. He turned his face slightly. His gaze swept over the dense crowd and briefly moved toward the back rows. Just one glance. Very quick. So quick almost no one noticed. But Vivian noticed. Their gazes met in the air across dozens of rows. It was old Mr. Sue. Zach turned back to the camera. He was my mentor. When I was in my early 20s, he brought me into this industry. His only request was that I take good care of his daughter. I did not do that well. I admit that. The audience stirred. Everyone knew about old Mr. Sue and Zach. But no one knew they were mentor and student. Mentor. That weight was heavier than father-in-law. And now, regarding Miss Sue, the host probed carefully. Zach was silent for 2 seconds. The whole venue was so quiet that even the current in the overhead lights could be heard. I have no malice toward her. He said. I do not regret anything I did. Including those 3 slaps. Someone in the audience inhaled sharply. The matter of those 3 slaps had already spread across the internet. But no one expected Zach to mention it publicly himself. Those 3 slaps made me understand one thing. Zach's voice remained flat, like he was telling someone else's story. Whether a person deserves respect is not decided by what she says. It is decided by what she does. Vivian Sue spent 5 years doing one thing, pushing me out of her world. I spent 3 hours doing another, putting her world back in order. We are even. He paused. The corner of his mouth curved faintly. Or rather, it became fair. The room was silent for 3 seconds. Then applause thundered. Vivian sat in the last rows, hand gripping the phone inside her coat pocket. On the screen was a half-written note. I want to tell you, I saw those 5 suits. Thank you for wearing them. She did not send it. She looked at Zach on stage, watching him answer questions calmly under the spotlight. Suddenly, the scene felt unreal in its beauty. 3 months ago, he was crouching on the ground picking up glass shards, half his face swollen and blood running from his lip. Now he sat on the stage of Asia's largest financial summit, and everyone looked up at him. But she knew that behind those 5 suits, one had a stitch she had sewn into the collar lining. In the first year of their marriage, the collar of one of his shirts had come loose. One night, on impulse, she used a needle and thread to sew 2 crooked stitches. Afterward, she threw the shirt back. Did he ever wear that shirt again? She did not know. But today, she saw it clearly. Inside the collar of his dark gray suit was a crooked hand-sewn stitch. Exactly like the 2 stitches she had sewn back then. He had removed the collar from that shirt and sewn it into the suit. Vivian buried her face in her hands. The tears finally fell. Warm. Streaming between her fingers. She cried quietly. Her whole body curled slightly in the chair. Her shoulders shook, but she made no sound. A middle-aged investor beside her noticed and handed her a tissue. She took it and said thank you. When the summit ended, people flooded toward the exit. Vivian stood, wiped her face, buttoned her coat, and followed the flow toward the door. At the entrance, she heard someone call from behind. Vivian Sue. She turned. Zach stood at the end of the passage. Bodyguards and assistants surrounded him. He signaled them to wait and walked over himself. In his hand was the half-finished bottle of mineral water from the interview, labeled Zach Joe. You came, he said. His tone was ordinary. As if saying the weather was good. I came to watch. Vivian sniffed. You spoke well. Zach looked her up and down. She wore no makeup. Her eyes were red. There was a loose thread stuck to her coat. He reached out and removed it. The motion was natural, as if he had done it countless times. You're going to Switzerland next month? I'm going too. He put one hand in his trouser pocket. Old Mr. Sue asked me to play chess. If you're coming, I'll have my assistant book your ticket. Vivian froze. Then she smiled. A smile that lit her whole face. She had not smiled like that in months. Okay. Zach nodded and turned away. His back was outlined clearly by the sunlight at the end of the passage. The shoulder line of his dark gray suit was sharp as a blade. Vivian stood at the entrance and watched him walk away. Her phone lit up in her pocket. An email. Sender, Lucerne Nursing Facility, Switzerland. Subject, a letter from Mr. Sue. She opened it. Only one sentence. A scanned line in her father's handwriting. Wanqing, Dad wants to come home for mid-autumn this year. Bring Xiao Zhou with you. Vivian put the phone back into her pocket and stepped outside. The sunlight hit her face brightly. She narrowed her eyes and breathed out a white cloud. Early winter air was clean and cold. The sky was bright blue. She walked down the steps. Past investors still discussing the summit. Past reporters holding long lens cameras. Past the busiest financial district in the city. She did not walk fast. But every step was steady. Her phone vibrated again. She took it out. A message from Zach. 2 words. Waiting. She held the phone against her chest for 2 seconds. Then replied, coming. Switzerland in December was cold and clean. Vivian and Zach sat side by side in the back seat of a black car. Outside the window stretched snowy mountains and a lake covered with a thin layer of ice. Since leaving the airport, Vivian had not said much. She kept looking out the window. Zach was reading a document. Occasionally, he marked something with a pen. The car was quiet. Only the sound of paper turning and the low hum of the heater remained. The car stopped in front of the Lucerne Nursing Facility. When Vivian got out, her legs felt weak. She steadied herself against the car door. Zach got out from the other side and looked at her. Nervous? A little, she admitted. Your father can't drink tea anymore. The doctor told him to quit. But he hides a tin of tiguanyin in the second drawer of his bedside table. Zach put the document into his bag. You'll know when we go in. He hasn't changed. Vivian followed him inside. The nursing facility was a white 3-story building. A row of neatly trimmed wintergreen shrubs stood outside. The hallway was quiet. Occasionally, a caregiver pushed a wheelchair past, its wheels soundless on the carpet. Her father's room was at the end of the second floor. The door was half open. Peking opera drifted out from inside. Vivian stood at the door and did not enter. Through the crack, she saw her father sitting in a wicker chair by the window. He wore a dark green sweater. A blanket covered his knees. He held a cup of hot water and was humming along with the radio. He had become thinner. His hair was completely white. But his back was still straight. From the side, he still looked stubborn. Dad. Vivian spoke. Old Mr. Sue turned. When he saw her, his eyes lit up. Then he saw Zach behind her, and the corner of his mouth curved. Oh, Xiao Zhou is here. He turned off the radio. Come in, come in. Don't stand at the door. It's cold outside. Vivian entered. Her father patted the chair beside him for her to sit, then pointed to the wicker chair across from him for Zack. The three sat around a small round table by the window. On the table was an unfinished Go board. Black and white pieces were scattered across half the board. Which of you will finish this game with me? Old Mr. Su placed his cup on the table. I play black. Mid-game. White's turn. Zack glanced at the board and placed a white stone. Old Mr. Su clicked his tongue. That move is impatient. Just like me. I learned from you. Old Mr. Su laughed and turned to Vivian. Wan Qing, you've lost weight. Vivian's nose stung. Dad, don't cry. Old Mr. Su patted the back of her hand. You came. That's enough. That's enough. The three of them sat by the window. Sunlight passed through the glass, warm and soft. Outside, snow glowed white on the mountain peaks. Old Mr. Su flipped through the newspapers from the past few months and occasionally chatted with Zack about the company. Vivian sat beside them, listening. Sometimes she added a sentence. Sometimes she stood and refilled their hot water. When she said, "I'll get water," and walked to the bedside cabinet, her peripheral vision caught the second drawer. She crouched and gently pulled it open a crack. Inside was indeed a tin of tiguanyin. The wrapping paper was wrinkled, clearly hidden for a long time. Beside it was a small photo frame. In the frame were three people. Her father. Zack. In the photo, she wore a white wedding dress. Zack wore that light blue shirt. Her father stood in the middle, smiling with wrinkles all over his face. It was their wedding photo from 5 years ago. Even her family albums did not have this one. She gently pushed the drawer back and returned to the window with 2 cups of hot water. Dad. She handed the water to old Mr. Su. That tin of tea you hid is expired. You can't drink it. Old Mr. Su froze. Then burst into laughter. You found it. Only 1 tin. Even if I can't drink it, I can smell it. Zack also smiled. He rarely smiled. But when he did, the curve of his mouth looked beautiful. The hardness of his whole face softened. Vivian stared at his smile for a moment. Then looked away, pretending to see the snowy mountains outside. That afternoon, the three of them sat together for over 3 hours. Old Mr. Su was in good spirits. Toward the end, he even insisted on another game with Zack. Vivian watched from the side as the two placed stone after stone on the board. Black and white slowly filled the grid. Suddenly, she felt she had waited a long time for this scene. 5 years. Between her and Zack stood something like a mountain. But today, sunlight melted that mountain. Water flowed past. And underneath, a road appeared. At dusk, Zack stood to leave. He said he had a remote meeting tonight and would come again tomorrow morning. When Vivian walked him to the door, she called him. Zack. He turned. The warm hallway light softened the side of his face. Thank you for bringing me here. She said. Your father missed you. Zack paused. I also, he did not finish. He waved and walked away. His figure disappeared around the corner. Footsteps gradually faded. Vivian stood at the door, watching him leave. Wind squeezed in through the crack, carrying the smell of snow. She closed the door and returned to the room. Her father had already put the ghost stones back into the box. He leaned in the wicker chair and looked at her. Wan Qing. Old Mr. Su said. Some roads must be walked alone. But some roads can be walked by 2 people. Dad was too impatient before. I pushed you to him and never asked if you were willing. Now you've grown up. Choose for yourself. Vivian walked to him and sat down, resting her head on his shoulder. I've chosen, Dad. Old Mr. Su stroked her hair and said nothing more. Outside the window, dusk fell. The snow mountains became layered silhouettes in the darkening sky. Vivian leaned against her father's shoulder, eyes closed, lips curved. In her heart, she counted the many things she still needed to do after returning. But she was not anxious. She had finally learned the word wait. Wait to do things right, one by one. Wait to turn "I'm sorry" into "thank you." Wait for the day she could stand beside Zack with a clear conscience and say, this time, let me stay with you. On New Year's Eve, Vivian returned to the villa. The key had been sent by her father. Attached was a small note, the house is still yours. Dad's New Year gift. Do not refuse. She stood in the entryway and changed shoes. The living room looked exactly the same as 4 months ago. The red wine stain was still on the carpet. It had dried into a dark brown patch embedded in the velvet fibers. The divorce agreement was still on the coffee table. The line, "What do you have to split?" and the line, "Sorry," faced each other across several blank lines. She walked over and picked up the agreement. On one page, in the corner, someone had lightly drawn a circle with pencil. It was Zach's handwriting. When he moved boxes in logistics, he used to mark cartons with pencil. Vivian had seen the shape of that circle a few times. She stared at it for a long time. Then placed the agreement in the study drawer. Inside the drawer were also the dark blue notebook, her father's postcard, and the small black camera she had dug out from beneath the money tree. She closed the drawer and went to the kitchen to boil water. Just as she poured herself a cup, the doorbell rang. She opened the door. Zach stood outside. He wore a black down jacket with the collar raised. The tip of his nose was red from the cold. In his hands were 2 bags of groceries. A fish tail stuck out from one bag. "Your father told me to spend New Year with you," he said. On the phone. Vivian stepped aside. "Come in. It's cold." When Zach changed shoes, she saw he was still wearing the same sneakers from 3 years ago. The soles were worn unevenly. His feet still turned slightly outward when he walked. She thought she should buy him a new pair later. But what she said was, "You bought fish." Crucian carp. "For your mother's soup." He carried the groceries into the kitchen and began untying the bags. Vivian followed and stood at the kitchen doorway. She watched him wash the fish, crush ginger, cut scallions. His movements were practiced. Clearly, he had done this countless times. She leaned against the doorframe and suddenly asked, "Did you go to Eric's sentencing?" Zach did not stop rinsing the fish. "No. Old Lynn told me the result." "You don't hate him?" "I did." He placed the washed fish on the cutting board and wiped his hands. "Half of those 3 slaps were thanks to him. But he has paid the price. 15 years inside is enough time for him to think." Vivian was quiet for a while. "Do you hate me?" Zach's hand paused for a beat. Then he continued slicing ginger, each cut steady. "After you wrote that letter, I stopped hating you," he said. "Hate existed when you had not seen me clearly. When you wrote that letter, you saw clearly. What about now?" Zach placed the ginger slices into the clay pot, covered it, and turned around. The warm kitchen light fell on his face. He had become a little thinner than 4 months ago, but his spirit was good. He leaned against the stove, both hands on the counter edge, looking at her. "Now?" The corner of his mouth curved. "Now I want to spend New Year properly with you." Vivian's eyes warmed. She walked over and stood before him. Only 1 step away. "Zach. I saw the 5 suits." "I know," he said. "The stitch you sewed is in the lining of the 3rd one. You kept it?" "I kept it." His voice softened. "You didn't sew it well. The thread end wasn't tucked in. But wearing it felt warm." Vivian reached out and tugged lightly at the zipper of his down jacket. He did not dodge. Instead, he lowered his head slightly. She looked at the swirl of hair on the top of his head and noticed one white hair. She gently pulled it out. He hissed and frowned at her. "What are you doing?" "You're old." She smiled. "You already have white hair." "I'm 33. That's normal." He rubbed the top of his head, but the corner of his mouth lifted. Outside, snow began to fall. Fine flakes landed on the window glass and melted into droplets sliding downward. In the clay pot, the Crucian carp soup bubbled. Fragrance escaped through the lid and filled the kitchen. The two stood before the stove. Neither spoke again. But it was not awkward. The silence was like 2 puzzle pieces finally locking together. Perfectly fitted. After a long time, Zach lifted the lid to check the soup. Then he took 2 bowls from the cabinet. "Serve the soup." He handed a bowl to Vivian. "You taste the salt first." Vivian took it and stirred the soup lightly with a spoon. The white broth floated with small drops of oil. The scent of ginger and fresh fish mingled together. Steam warmed her face. She took a spoonful and sipped. "Just right." Zach took the bowl and also tasted. Then nodded and carried the pot to the dining table. Vivian followed, bringing 2 pairs of chopsticks and 2 small plates. Outside, the snow fell heavier. The villa living room glowed with warm yellow light. On the dining table, 2 bowls of crucian carp soup steamed softly. They sat across from each other. More natural than they had ever been in the past 5 years. Zach picked up a piece of fish and placed it in Vivian's bowl. "Eat," he said. Vivian lowered her head and looked at the fish. White and tender. No bones. She put it into her mouth. As she chewed, her nose stung again. But she did not cry. She swallowed, raised her face, and smiled at him. "Happy New Year, Zach. Happy New Year." Outside, fireworks had begun at some point. One after another, they exploded in the snowy night, casting colorful light across the floor-to-ceiling windows. Neither of them went to the window to watch. They simply sat at the table, facing 2 bowls of soup, a plate of greens, 1 steamed fish, and 2 bowls of white rice. After dinner, Zach washed the dishes. Vivian leaned against the kitchen door and watched his back as he scrubbed the pot. Water ran loudly. He hummed a tune she could not clearly identify. Vivian quietly took out her phone and snapped a photo of his back. Then sent it to her father. 1 minute later, old Mr. Sue sent back a voice message. She tapped it open. Her father's voice carried a smile. "Good. Good. That's how it should be." She put away the phone and entered the kitchen. From behind Zach, she reached out and picked up a clean bowl. "The remaining soup can be reheated tomorrow. We'll send it to my mother." "Okay." Zach turned the washed clay pot upside down on the drying rack. "I'll go with you tomorrow morning." Vivian nodded. She stood beside him, took the dishcloth from his hand, and wiped the last bit of water from the rim of the bowl. Their fingertips touched. Both pulled back slightly. Then both smiled at the same time. Outside, fireworks continued. Snow still fell. The villa lights were on, illuminating 2 figures standing side by side in the kitchen. Some roads are very long. But as long as 2 people walk them together, distance no longer feels frightening. That's all for today's story. Remember to subscribe and leave a comment.